Well, Tom, hello. Thank you for joining me
Hey,
today.
Mo. Hey.
Hey. For those who do not know, Tom is our office partner preferred um, loan officer, and we're going to talk today about who he is, the business and support he can provide for all of us, as well as how to help you connect him to your buyers. It's really important. And while this conversation is directed more at the newer agents or agents who are really ramping up their business, I would imagine as we've grown our office, we have seasoned agents who might already have loan officer, loan professionals that they've been working with. However, it's never a bad idea to add another great vendor partner to your arsenal, right? So we're going to take a few moments just to get to know Tom and his services and hopefully answer any questions that you already may have about how to utilize and help with loan officer services. And we'll get started. So Tom, first let's start with tell us about who you are.
Thanks, Mo. So my name is Tom Corcoran. I'm with United American Mortgage. I've been with United American Mortgage for a very, very long time. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. My very first job was research for real estate appraisal. Then I actually went to work for United American Mortgage as like an office boy, right? And I did that for a few years, sat at an escrow desk for a few years. And then I went off to college and graduated and did all that jazz. Then I was in private banking for about 10 years. I worked here in Los Angeles, but then in addition to that, I worked for HSBC in New York. Once I got to the 10-year mark, I thought, I'm always a top producer, when it comes to the finance piece, both commercial and residential, never going to make a lot of money working for the bank because whoever does. So I just decided to leave banking, and I went back to just being doing the finance piece only. So I came back to United American Mortgage after being gone for a long time. And the reason why I picked United American is not only because I grew up in the company, but in addition to that, United American has one of the most extensive lending menus in the industry. Right? They've been around for almost 30 years, which is something that's very important to note. It's hard to find a mortgage company that's been around for 30 years, right? A lot of them come, a lot of them go, right? But these guys have been around a long, long time. We're hybrids. And I think that's part of the reason why we've been around for so long, because we're both brokers and bankers. And so what that means is we have over 60 different lending partners, right? With some of those partners, we work in a broker capacity, which means that we do all the work, but the bank lends the money. In other situations, we work in the lender capacity, which means that we will lend the money to the client, and then we will sell the loan after funding for servicing because we're not loan servicers. And it's hard to describe, but I really tell people that there's nothing that we can't do. So currently in my pipeline, I've got conventional conforming loans. I've got VA loans, FHA loans, reverse mortgages. I've got private money loans, a couple that I'm funding this morning. I do construction loans, home renovation loans, cross collateralization loans.
You know
There's
about
really
down payment
what?
assistance?
Down payment assistance loans, 1% down, 2% down, 3% down, no money down. I mean,
everything.
It's really that's my point, right? Like our menu is so extensive that there's nothing that we can't tackle. But the benefit is more than just on the front end, right? Where I actually find that menu to be the most useful is if something goes wrong in a transaction, right? If you've got a conventional loan going and something goes wrong and you have to pivot, right? A lot of lenders will just decline it and be like, I'm sorry, I can't help you, cancel the transaction, get your earnest money back, call it a day. For us, right, we have the ability to pivot. It's like, well, no, we need to keep you in this transaction. The way to do that is I'm going to switch this from conventional to FHA, or I'm going to, come in with a private money note, and then I'll clean it up after the fact. It's just that ability to find solutions, right? Our motto is solutions-based lending, right? There's never a problem. There's just always a solution.
I love that. Actually, you answered like 3 or 4 questions in that. No, no, that's perfect because I heard 2 major things though, and I want to make sure everybody picks up on this. Number one, the longevity of the company actually is deeper than just 30 years. If you do your math, that means they were here in the great meltdown and they're standing after. That speaks volumes. Even if you weren't in the business and you don't understand how we woke up to like an industry in shambles, the fact that a company was there then, because that was 2008, and they're here now stronger than ever, that speaks volumes to the strength of the company. And then the other thing that I heard you say, and I want to make sure people don't miss this, is that the options for your client rest in one location, right? It's like going to, you're hungry, you can't decide what you want, you go to a buffet. Whatever you want is there if you need it, versus I went to a chicken place and I really wanted vegetables, right?
Well, wait. That's so funny that you say that, Mo, because what I tell people all the time when I'm trying to describe it is us Southern California people, right? So we all know In-N-Out. You go to In-N-Out, and if you don't know the secret menu, In-N-Out's got like, what, 10 things on the menu? Exactly. So that's most lenders, right? Like even the retail lenders like Bank of America and US Bank or Wells Fargo, they've got an In-N-Out menu, right? You come to United American Mortgage, it's like going to the Cheesecake Factory. It's a book, right? It takes you 2 cocktails and an hour to get through it, right? So that's the best comparison, right?
And I mean, and that's so, you can see that in your mind visually, you can see that. Because one of the things that has been happening is, of course, at the first date and a conversation with the loan officer, oh yeah, you look great, we can do it, here's your pre-approval letter. And then the transaction shows up. And then as agents, we're scrambling, trying to save their deposit money, which at these prices in California, that's not $2. That's a lot of money. And then we're standing in that gap. So you really just answered what would have been my next question, why a buyer should choose to work with your company and the benefit they would get. Meaning, again, the whole focus is being solution oriented, like we are in our position. It's a perfect match, right?
Well, and actually, I think that's a nice segue though into, like one of the benefits of the process, right? So for me, right, like there's a difference because you mentioned like, they'll meet somebody and they'll have a conversation. They'll say, okay, you're great to go. They'll not look at a shred of documentation. I don't like to call companies out, but there is one company that I will forever call out for this, and that is Rocket Mortgage, Quicken Mortgage. You can get your loan approval in 7 seconds, Mo. Believe me, you're approved. Go shop. No, it doesn't work that way. If we could do my job in 7 seconds, I wouldn't have a job, right? It all would be automated. So there's a difference between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval. A pre-qualification is a conversation. We have a conversation. I talk to you about what you do for a living. How much money do you have in the bank? I might do a soft pull, but I don't look at a shred of documentation, right? And I say, okay, if all that is correct and true, then you should be able to move forward with this. And then I talk about the next steps. Next step would be to take the application and collect all the documentation so that we can get to a pre-approval. A pre-approval means that I have reviewed their credit, their income, and their assets. If it's a conforming loan or a conventional loan or a VA loan or a USDA loan, I've actually run the automated underwriting system, run it through the automated underwriting system. I've got that DU approval that everybody talks about, right? Like I'm ready to go, right? I am ready to fund that loan. The only thing I need is a purchase contract, an appraisal, and a title report. Those are the pre-approvals that I issue. I don't do pre-qualifications.
Right. So, thank you for saying that because that matters. And you know something? That's a perfect segue to, I want to share something here because what we're going to get into is, all right, all this sounds great. I actually have, 4 or 5 buyers. I know someone is saying that. How do I get them to you? Right? How do I introduce them to? And we have a suggestion, folks. Right? And you're going to explain this a little bit about how when they're in conversation with their buyer, and a buyer, of course, folks, is defined as they have signed the buyer representation form. If they have not legitimately hired you, you don't have a buyer, you just have a friend that wants to around with you. Okay, with that said, can you see my screen?
Yes, yes. Okay, so before we go any further, we need to give a shout out to Heather Prechet. Okay, so Heather Prechet presents a buyer, right, in the best possible way. I have to, you know, kudos to her. When Heather Prechet presents a buyer to a lender like myself, okay, she's already had the conversation. She's taken the time to get to know her buyer, and there's a few reasons why she does that. But I think one of the things that we need to point out is she wants to make sure that that's a qualified buyer and that she is allocating her most important resource, which is her time, right, to the right client, yes. Right? So she takes the time to get to know them. Right? And she has a conversation with them. And when she would send me a referral, right, she would have her own, she had this intake sheet, and on it, it would have like the notes from her conversation, right? You know, they currently own their house, they're going to sell it, there's this much equity. They have been at their job for 2 years, you know, this is what they want to buy, this is the area that they're looking in, you know, and then she'll email that to me and copy my assistant, Tracy, who is, which we'll talk about in a minute. She's the master of my destiny. It's the best possible way to not only get to know your client and solidify your own relationship and make sure that you're working with a solid, you know, client, but it's also the best way to deliver not just a lead, but right, a referral. Right? I am referring this client to you so that we can get to the next step, so that we can get to the ultimate step, which is to close a transaction. So with Heather's permission and her help and guidance, you know, Nicole and I took that intake sheet and we modified it, right? And we kind of added a little bit more to it, you know, but really this is pretty close to the same form that Heather uses. So, you know, you'll see in the form that it's just questions that you can have in a conversation, right? It's not, it shouldn't make you feel uncomfortable to ask these questions, right? These are just like general conversation questions, like, what do you do for a living? You know, hey, what is it that you're looking to buy? And if you go back up to the top, Mo, I think that the most important one is, thank you for reaching out to me. How did you find me? So it's also a tracking tool for you, right? Like, how am I getting my business? Am I getting these from Facebook leads? Am I getting this from, you know, work or the flyer that I posted in the break room? Like, where is this information coming from?
We are thinking how we're connecting them to you, but also still in business in our position as consultants to our clients. Okay, I like it.
Correct. And none of these questions, I mean, you know, there are certain times that a client will share information with an agent, but there are certain times that a client will only want to share certain information with a lender, right? There are people who are very private about, you know, if you think about what a lender looks at, right? I see somebody's entire life, their entire history, right? When I look at their credit report, their income, their assets, their bank account, right? And so my job is all about discretion. So sometimes these questions might make somebody feel uncomfortable, but they shouldn't, right? So it's, how do you think your credit is? Oh, well, my credit's terrible. It's, you know, I think it's like a 500. Well, you know, right there, right, that there might be a problem, right? But you continue on through the interview process, right? Tell me about what you do for a living. Oh, well, you know, I'm not really working right now. Okay, well, you're probably not in a position to buy a house at the moment, but you can kind of dig into that a little bit more. Because it might not just be like, I'm not working right now, but what they really mean is, oh, well, I was at my previous job for 2 years and I got a new job, but I don't start until next month. That's totally okay. And that's very important information. So those are just some examples, right, about, you know, how to get to know your client, but then also position your client in the best possible way for your lending partner.
Love it. You know something, and it's one of the things that we're working on is really getting particularly new agents really connected to the role of consultant. How can you consult if you don't know, right? If I go to the doctor and I walk in, that happened to me once, I was telling them what was wrong with me. Well, I was real wrong. Right? I was real wrong because I don't know what I'm talking about. If they had listened to me, you probably wouldn't know me now. Right? Same thing. Our clients, you know, our potential clients, everything is so accessible on the internet, HGTV, right? And $1 Million Listing, all these things. They think they know. And they know.
Yeah, Mo, $1 Million Listing is my favorite, right? Because every deal just ends on a handshake and we're done. right? So deals close,
and
right?
doing
Because
all
that's how
kind
it
of
works.
craziness and all kind of craziness, but it's not that, right? And the thing that we don't want people, our clients who trust us to guide them, because that's what a consultant is, to find out it's not that in the middle of a transaction where money is at stake, the heart is falling because they fell in love with the house, or really feeling dejected, because even in your examples, that even if you pick up that someone's not ready today, doesn't mean they're not a future client. Because when we talk about our pipeline, it's business today, it's business in 60 days, it's business in a year. And we just understand it's all of us, though, when we get them into the process, you want it to be what? Successful at the end, right?
And that's a really good segue into another very, very important point. When I talk to a client, right, and I have that conversation, right, sometimes that client is ready right now. Sometimes that client needs to do a few things before they're ready. And sometimes that client has a long way to go before they're going to be qualified. But the most important part for me is I never want to make somebody feel bad about themselves by saying something along the lines of, you're not qualified, you're not worth my time, et cetera, which is a different segue into, transaction-based versus relationship-based, but also because I just don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, right? Like, it's just not nice. So if I do an intake with a client and I have the conversation and then I go through the verification process, right? And I pull a credit report and I look at pay stubs and I look at all that kind of stuff. Typically where I find the biggest issue is the credit score. Now, I'm a certified credit specialist through the National Association of Mortgage Brokers, but I can only work on your credit if it's part of an active mortgage application. So there are some situations where I say, hey, you are not qualified right now, right? But if we do the following, right, you will be qualified, right? So I always like to send a follow-up with an action list. Hey, pay off this credit card, or we need to save X amount of more dollars, or we need you to stay in your job for another 6 months, whatever the action items are. And sometimes those action items are really quick and I can fix it right there through like a rapid rescore or something. And other times it's a longer process, but that client is always going to leave that conversation with me with either an immediate action plan or a long-term action plan. And I'll tell you what, Mo, I've sent out that action plan and I've had clients follow up with me 18 months later and say, okay, Tom, I think I'm ready. And I'll say, hey, Mr. Smith, or whoever it is. And I'll say, great, did you do all this? And they're like, yeah, well, let's go look. Pull a credit report and bam. When I first pulled the credit report, it was 550. That was a year and a half ago. They did everything I told them to do. Now we're at a 720 and we're ready to boogie, right? So it's always, whenever I have that, that's part of my business model. And it's one of my commitments to your clients, right? I will never let them leave without an action plan.
That's something I've told several. Yes is either now or how do we get to the yes in a little bit. Never a no. Either now or plan. Okay.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna let the referring agent know, like, hey, now it's not a good time, but I did send out an action list, and put them on the back burner, keep them on your drip, follow up with them in 6 months, whatever the case may be. But there's one other thing that you were commenting on that I really want to touch on because I couldn't agree with you more completely. You were talking about being a consultant for your clients, and one of the greatest detriments to our society recently is the death of the expert. People have think that they can go online and they can get it all figured out and they can do your job. What's the big deal? Why do you get paid so much? All this other kind of stuff, right? We are commission-based salespeople, but we are also experts in our field, both in what we do and in our markets, right? So there's nobody that knows that market better than you because it's your market, right? And so, when you come with that, approach of focused on a relationship versus a transaction and being a consultant to your client, right? Your success will it's exponential. You'll see all your top producers currently at Keller Williams Inglewood. So we're talking about, Mike Berlin, we're talking about Heather Prochet, we're talking about Corey Jackson, all the people that have been here a long time and have been on the top of that list for a long time. If you talk to any of those people, they are all consultants, right? They all consult with their client to find the best way forward, right? And not just fit that immediate need of being a transaction service provider where, oh, you want to buy this? Okay, here, you bought it, bye-bye. Yeah. And so best way forward.
And even to piggyback on that, the last thing I want is the newbies to go, well, see, I don't have the experience and I don't have the years in or what have you. And they know Coach Mahogany always says that old adage, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. What does that mean? That means you've done the study, you're in these conversations with the experts, and you're connected to the experts. That's how, as you learn and grow and build your business and time over time, you're able to stand very firmly in that consultant position. For instance, I've been in the business 18 years. I have a general, semi-impressive understanding of the mortgage industry. I'm not an expert in that though. I'm calling Tom because that's right.
But that's the point, right? And there's nothing wrong with telling somebody, I need to research that real quick. Let me circle right back to you. I'll tell you what, guys, whether you're an existing agent or a new agent, if you ever meet a mortgage banker or broker or whoever that tells you that they know everything that there is to know about the mortgage industry, you need to run, not walk away from that person. It is impossible. The guidelines change every day. The process changes every day, specifically in the last year with the COVID situation, right? So I'm constantly getting circulars from VA, FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all of my jumbo lenders and all my non-QM lenders. They're constantly changing the process and the guidelines. So every time I think I've identified a product, I have to go back and review it and make sure that we're going to meet that. And there are some times where you'll miss something. It's an opaque guideline that was subject to interpretation. And then you have to argue and fight for it and prove it and tell your story.
Or it was appropriate in February, but come March, it's different, which, something I hadn't even thought about until we were talking, the way that we as the consultants for our clients stay on top of this, right? Because we should have a general understanding. Number one, we're going to always attend Tom's bi-monthly now, right? It's twice a month market update, because that's how you know the most current stuff. However, as a real estate agent, are there any type of publications or things we should pay attention to kind of know the buzzwords or know when there's something we should maybe ask you more about? Is there?
Well, I'll give you an example. So, Cherry, not to call people out, but Cherry's on fire. She's great, right? She was on her way to visit a client. She reached out to me and she said, hey, I'm going to talk to these buyers real quick. Going to be VA. She gave me some details, right? And I'll let you know if we're going to move forward and if I'm going to refer them to you, which was a great soft introduction. Because what was great about that was I caught on to something that she said about that particular scenario. And I said, happy to help with VA, not a problem. I did notice that you said this. If it's going to be a VA loan, then it must be this. So it was great. So then she went, so I said, please, when you're talking to the client, verify with the client that that is the case. And she did, and it was great. And then, I followed up with the client. I've talked to the client. We're moving forward. We're working on all the docs and all the jazz. And it was awesome, right? So asking those questions is super, super important. I still ask questions every day. I've got, a bunch of loan officers that I work with that have been doing this a lot longer than me, or I can call the underwriters, or I can dig into the guidelines. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. I'd much rather ask the question than get into an escrow and have an issue, which has also happened before. I mean, everybody makes mistakes, but I mean, you have to learn from those mistakes and then know where to look for the information. And I think that the same applies on the real estate side. You guys have got tremendous resources and a wealth of knowledge just within your roster, right? You've got, all these agents that are there that have been there doing this a long, long time. So if a question is there, right, an answer can be found without issue.
Absolutely. And, now you reminded me of scenarios where, again, back to our clients, they're more savvy and they have more access to bits of information. Doesn't necessarily mean it's appropriate for their situation, but they know these options. And I personally had a conversation with a potential client who thought they knew what kind of loan, thought they knew what it was going to be. And then in conversations with the loan officer, conversation with you is like, well, wait a minute, maybe there's a better scenario or there are options. And as real estate agents, and I've said it and I'll say it again, that conversation is best had with the expert in the lending process, right?
Uh-huh.
Is absolutely. Should you know about the different type of loans and the general idea around them? Absolutely. But to decide what works best for them, they have to make the decision coming from a current knowledgeable standpoint, right?
Well, and as you go through, right, so it's not, in my opinion, it's not a real estate agent's job to know, right, like all that in-depth information, right? You'll know in the course of your conversation when to bring in your expert, right? And if that's me, great. You'll know this is a question for Tom. Let's get Tom on the phone, or let's get a meeting set up with Tom so we can dig into that a little bit more. And just like with me, I have clients all the time that will ask me, you know, questions regarding the contract. Do I have a fundamental understanding of the contract? Absolutely. Am I an expert in the contract? No, I'm not. So I refer them back to their agent. You know, that's a better question for Mahogany, right? So, you know, Mahogany manages all things contract, and she'll be able to talk to you about, you know, the nuances of the contingency periods and what your recourse is, et cetera, et cetera. You know, and it's knowing when to kind of shift back to your level of expertise, but having a fundamental understanding of like loans and lending products, I think is a very good idea. Which is a nice time to mention that Nicole has asked me to dig in deeper. Instead of just doing a market update every 2 months, she wants me to dig in deeper and have like specific topics. So I actually am going to leave that to you, Mo, to kind of figure out what topics you want me to talk about, because I can, as you can tell, I can sit here and talk all day. But yeah, and you know, the other thing that I think is super duper important, right, is that, you know, nobody has all the answers, right? And so if you're new to the industry, this industry is not as easy as people make it seem, right? Like it's hard work, right? We all work hard. And those of us who have been around a long time, you know, we've been through all those cycles. I mean, my personal company saw the .com boom, right? Then it saw the .com crash. Then it saw the Great Recession. Then it's seen COVID. I mean, we've gone through all these things, and it's just, the industry is constantly changing. There's always some new thing that's going to come and take us over and revolutionize and put us all out of business, right? Remember Purple Bricks? Purple Bricks was going to put everybody out of business, remember, Mo? Right? And it was going to be this wonderful thing. They filed bankruptcy last year. So I'm just saying, you know what I mean? It's hard work.
Is ever evolving. So, okay, that lets folks know that this is just the first of many conversations, making sure that Keller Williams Inglewood agents are the most prepared to be the best consultants for their clients. So we'll end with this. This is my last question. They've taken this in. I know my folks are like, oh, let me get a copy of that intake and their form, and they're learning how to better connect. Let's talk about the actual referring to you process. How's the best way, or what is the preferred way to refer a client to you? I'm talking in terms of contact, right? Is it email, text, to whom? And then number two, finally, when an agent does refer a buyer to you, what can they expect in terms of time or process before they hear back from you about where the buyer sits?
That's great. So again, shout outs to Nicole, Mike Berlin, and Heather Preche, right, for helping me come up with a process, right, that meets all those requirements. So I am not one of these loan officers that will refer everybody to my assistant. I hate that, right, because people want to do business with me. My assistant is phenomenal, right? Tracy is fantastic. If you can't find me and it's during business hours, like, call my office, right? And Tracy will find me. Like, she manages my schedule very, very tight, which is great. So that's why the best way to send a referral to me is typically via email, right? You send an email, right? You copy my assistant, Tracy, right? And Tracy will grab onto that, right? And she'll acknowledge receipt, or I'll grab onto it, acknowledge receipt. One of us will grab onto it, and we'll get that client. Somebody will reach out to that client right away. It'll either be me or it'll be Tracy, and we're going to get that client on the calendar as soon as possible at their convenience. I will make myself available at nights and weekends to meet clients, you know, convenience requirements. And we're going to have that quick intake conversation, right? So you'll see in my emails, please let me know when you're available for a quick introduction call. The benefit of having that 10-minute introduction call is that I can ask all the questions I need to ask right there to know exactly which direction we're going to go. Then at that point in that call, if we're going to move forward, I can set expectations with the client about the next steps and the process. Okay. And we'll go through that. Now, after that quick introduction call, right, either myself or Tracy is going to reply to you and say, okay, thank you very much for the referral. I spoke to Mrs. Smith, and this is what we're doing. So either, hey, we have to put them on a path forward because they're not quite ready yet, or no, we're ready to go right now. We're taking the application on this day, or whatever the case may be. So that's the general process. If you guys can include this form in your email to me and Tracy, I mean, it's better for all of us, right? But it's not, an absolute requirement. But I actually think that this is a great form to help you grow your own business and track your own business as well.
It helps you think to the whole person. So I think it's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that's the process. If you are on your way to see a client, right, and it's a new prospect and you haven't had this interview, and you say, just like Cherry did, hey, Tom, I'm going to see this client. I think it's a VA deal. I think it's going to look like this. I'll let you know how it's going to go. I'll respond to that and say, if I caught something in that scenario, like I did, I'll point that out to you. Or, hey, good luck. Sounds great. If you call me, I try and pick up every call I can, right? But I'm sure you can imagine, like, I'm on the phone constantly and I don't know when to shut up. So, so if you're like have an urgent situation, this is what I tell people. Like, hey, Tom, I'm with a client right now, right? So call if I don't answer. I'm with a client right now. Do you have time for a quick question? Because I don't want you to lose an opportunity because it came down to a lending question that you didn't have the answer to. Right. So send me a text, and 99% of the time I can jump off and say, okay, give me 3 minutes or give me 5 minutes, and I'll call you right back, because and we'll make it happen.
Let me make this clear though. The last minute emergency text scenario should not be the regular way we connect with you. I'm saying that. Or
I agree. Yeah.
Right? Because imagine I'm dealing with multiple agents as well as clients, and so if someone calls me, even if you're looking for me, if I don't pick up, let's say you call at 1 o'clock, there should not be panic at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock if you haven't heard from me yet. So I think we also need to remember that there's a certain amount of window of time that is a reasonable response time. I can say personally, when I have had an agent tell an agent to call Tom, or when I've had a client that was in the middle of a mess with another lender, which probably wasn't going to turn into business for Tom, Tom has been very responsive to helping them and answering them. Sometimes pick up the phone right there, and sometimes it's been later in the day. I just wanted to make sure that expectation of, we're not Pop-Tarts, right?
Yeah. Well, and thank you, Mom. I appreciate that. Look, I want to be everybody's friend, right? And I want to establish, and good or bad, I want to establish relationships with clients is the better way to say that, right? So I don't like to rush people off the phone. I don't like to, even though I'm incredibly busy, I don't want the client to feel that in my voice. I want that client to feel like when I'm on the phone with them and I'm having that conversation, they are the only one for me. Right. And so like I can manage that. Right. And so if I need to do that quick, like I do cleanup crew all the time. Right. I'm constantly getting calls where somebody's in escrow, other mortgage banker dropped the ball, whatever it was, and they come to me, and then that's that panic thing. And I can always do that for you guys. But again, it's about building that relationship with that client, because I want that client to give you a good review. Right. Because when you bring me in as your preferred lender, I am now a part of your team. Right? You have brought me in to help your client, right? And so I want to make sure that that client has the best possible experience.
You know what? That's a perfect end point to our conversation. Everyone needs to understand that as an office, when we select a vendor or preferred partner, they've been vetted. They've been checked, they've been worked with, and they've chosen the best person for us. And understand that while Tom, if we do a deal together, Tom is all about Mahogany and her client, and as he will be for you. But also Tom's greater relationship is with KW Inglewood. And that is why, even if you don't have the experience yet, working with him, understand that it's the experience of all of us working with him in this relationship that he has proven time and time again is important to him, not just transactional, but important as a relationship. And that is why we endorse working with our favorite preferred lender partner. Thank you so much for your time today. I'll see you on the next conversation.
Yes.
We'll talk something fun like types of loans or something. We'll figure it
out. Types
out.
of loans. Yeah. Yeah. All right, love. Thank you very much, Mahogany.